Hi everyone. Today we'll be talking about AR and how it's redefining the customer experience. Today I have with me here Dileep to give a little bit of his insight. Thank you for joining us, Dileep.
Thanks, Joseph, for having me on the talk.
So AR and VR are terms that really have been taking over the industry, but there seems to be a lot of obscurity about the terms AR, VR, MR, and XR. Can you explain the differences?
Sure. When we try to differentiate these, terminology, so to speak, this all falls under, now the industry is calling it as spatial computing. And so spatial computing has a lot of applications. AR, VR, and MR clubs into something called XR. So XR is just the term used to club all these technologies or applications, so to speak. So now let me differentiate that a bit. When it comes to AR, it's augmented reality. And augmented reality is where you start applying a layer of digital content on top of a physical space or a physical environment. So, and that's one of the, I would say, the technology that is a lot more adopted because of one or two reasons. One is AR does not require an external device which is specific to that, right? So if you have a mobile user or if you're a laptop or a desktop user, you can kind of step into that technology or make use of that technology. And also it is easier to layer it in a physical environment and get people into that AR. So AR is I would say the easiest to adopt in that sense. Then comes VR, which is virtual reality. Virtual reality is where you are immersing the user into another environment, a world by itself. So you can create virtual worlds and you can get the user to step into that environment. And virtual reality works only with having specific devices that cater to those kind of requirements. So you have the likes of Facebook's device is there. Then you have Apple that has recently launched a device. Microsoft used to have something called HoloLens. So the various devices that are out there. So you need to have specific devices to get into the virtual reality world. So VR has its own use cases. And then comes MR, which is mixed reality. And I think that term is kind of fading out in between. So mixed reality is where you can switch between the AR and the VR environment. So you can, that also needs specific devices and gadgets, which like the HoloLens and I think the Apple's new Vision Pro is also launched that. And so that's going to be a game changer soon. So you can switch between both the worlds, and based on application, you can decide whether you want to go into AR or a virtual mode as well. So that is the difference when it comes to AR, VR, and MR, which is all clubbed into XR now.
Sure.
Right? So and so based on industry or based on your application, you have to choose the right one.
Yeah, and how do companies start to differentiate and decide which one is best for them?
So there are, as I mentioned, the easiest one to get started with is AR, and because of the low barrier to entry in terms of you don't have to give the end consumer another device. So now I'll just quickly try to cover it's got industry specificity to associated with it. So when it comes to AR, I've seen and industries also from what we've learned from industry and studies and things like that, and also use cases which we have deployed. We have found that AR is used mostly in environments where there's a larger customer or consumer audience that you're trying to cater to, and therefore you should keep the barrier for adoption as minimal as possible, right? And therefore AR is used in retail environments. AR can be used in any form of large consumer-facing kind of applications. So e-commerce is is an inevitable candidate for it, so that's an industry. So retail specifically is the right fit for AR. And when it comes to VR, what we have found, and mostly adoption, because VR also is adoption is seemingly catching a lot more adoption from the early years. VR is used primarily in two spaces. One is in training and simulation, where you want to get your end users to engage with your product or train them on how to use those products or train them on how to react to specific scenarios. So you have to immerse them into that environment for doing especially like safety training or engineering training, or even for now we have simulators for driving as well, right? So there are various applications where even in the medical setup, we have seen use cases where people use them for training doctors or salespeople on medical devices like robotic arms, things like that. So VR has been more adopted in healthcare, training, engineering kind of industries. And mixed reality is most what we have seen the use cases are around field services, repairs, maintenance, heavy engineering kind of scenarios, where you need additional data put up about an equipment, about an environment, brought in, superimposed on that physical environment. And then further on, you have to go into an immersive experience to understand, details of an engine or a device and things like that. So there is industry specificity around what is good for which industry, but generally AR is, in terms of adoption, AR seems to be more adopted in a retail industry setting.
So, like you said, AR seems to be a good fit for the retail or B2C space, and research actually has been showing that customers are more likely to buy a product when they're able to engage with it in that AR setting. So how should companies start to go about actually meeting that customer expectation and finally boosting their sales?
Yeah, so as you said, customer experience is a very important, and it's a top priority for most of the retail brands out there, most of the organizations. So AR plays in a very, I would say, significant role in also improving customer experience. And so AR can be used in different ways in the retail industry. So some of the use cases we have found, which is found adoption, our customers embracing such offerings. One is that of try it on, where the customer is able to, if you are, be it an apparel, your cosmetics, even to furnishings and some of these other kind of areas, where you can try on the product on yourself, or it is try it in your environment. Both are use cases we have seen that seem to have adoption, and if customers can engage with their products and better understand their requirements, or better engage with your product, that's certainly one of the ways to which. The other area where we have seen people use AR, customers or retail try to AR, is to create in-store experiences. Now, people walk into your store, you might want to do retention there, you might want to collect some customer information. These are places where AR can play a role, and we have seen creating in-store experiences where if the store is a smaller store and you want to give additional information about a product, so just with a click of a QR code, you can actually capture more information, or you can even things like, hey, this suit or this particular pant or this particular shirt can go with this combination. Have you tried this? And that is available here. So that's an interesting use case. So you can do some amount of upselling. You can create experiences. Another thing is, once the customer has logged into your environment and given you some information, they're also sharing information on what are some of their interests. So those are all data points you can capture. So try it on, creating in-store experiences. And the third thing which we have found also getting adoption these days is where you like a product, but you might want to customize it. You might want to visualize it better. And this not only applies to B2C, but it also applies to B2B, where a customer wants to see a product and it says, I would like it in a different color, my branding placed on it, things like that. So be it starting from a t-shirt all the way to a furniture to it could be even your large office space kind of setting. Any of these can be customized, and I can place an order based on that. And the good thing is today technology allows you to customize, know the exact cost for customization, and go and make a purchase, and that can go into the fulfillment center with those dimensions and details. So we have seen use cases where customers use it for creating cabins, office spaces, fit outs, those kind of environments. So those are all applications. So you have the try it on, you have the option to create in-store environments, you can do it for configurable products as well. So these are all use cases of AR.
So given all that, how does a company actually productively implement that?
So if an organization wants to go ahead and roll out an AR program or AR project, so to speak, there are 5 things that we typically ask them to take into account. So the first one is context, right? Context in the sense of who is the users that you are targeting and where is that user base that you're trying to target. So based on that, you are defining your program of AR. So the user base, and how are you going to, what kind of would interest that user base, and also the context would mean, are you looking at creating kind of a campaign around it? Are you trying to do a try-on with it? So based on that, the context in which the user is going to be engaged has to be defined. So the second element is control. Control talks about environment, lighting, as in how do you control the environment in which the consumer or the end client is going to engage with your product, with your store, with your online. So how do you highlight that engagement, that touch point of an AR touch point? So from transitioning from a normal experience to an AR experience, how do you control it, right? So how do you call it? How do you make sure that somebody is set up to transition to that? So for that, sometimes lighting matters. Sometimes, how is your shop front person trained for it? That is also important. Or on your website, how you highlight some of those things. So these are important, right? So that's how do you manage that environment. Your UI, your UX should lead them to transition to that. The third one is call to action. There should be clear indicators, be it in the physical world or in the online space, for someone to engage with this experience. So in physical spaces, you would have posters that come up, or engagements even in your storefront, where people would see something and make it look exciting, right? So it could be because you've got a specific discount associated with that level of interaction. You might have a specific game going on there, so you've got to visualize that to the customer to engage with it. So you say, here, quickly scan this to have an experience. So it should be very easy for them to get into that. The call to action should make it look very easier to step into that. So even for online, for that matter. So call to action is important. How do you create the call to action to attract the customer for that experience? That's important. So that's the third thing. So the fourth thing is content. And I mean, that is very clear from the word content, right? The digital content that you create. So it shouldn't be very flat. It should be engaging. It can be 3D. It can also be a video, it can be an image, it can be an animation. Depending on the first thing I talked about, the context, you will design the content based on the age groups. Like kids would probably want to see their cartoon figures, or the comic stars, or the superstars, or whatever that you want to bring in there for engagement. So if it is a gamified environment, you would have more animation, GIFs and things like that, where you engage with it. When you interact with it, there is some things. But if it's not a product, it's more either a 3D aspect or a video where you see more content about that specific product. So based on it, you have to define your content, and you should make sure that your content team knows to create content that is attractive, that can engage the customer and things like that. So based on the context, content will also. So content is one of the most important part there, while others are equally important. But content plays a huge role in engagement. Finally, we have seen the fifth thing, which is communication, right? We've seen that many times you roll this out, but typically when you have a project, there's something where you have to ensure that the customers are adopting it. So there's this whole process of how do you make your customers aware that there is something like this already in play? How do you make consumers aware that, hey, there is a new option like this? So that communication, not just on that particular environment, but in other channels that you have, be it your PR exercises that you do, or in your TV ads, in your Facebook ads, or social media. We have to create a buzz around it so that people will come and be part of that. And so it's also part of creating that experience, right? So communication is so important after you launch it. So when you're planning that whole program, you should keep in mind this aspect of communication. How do we communicate this to the customers and make sure that they are finding it in the right places and coming onboarding. So you can even track the traffic from there as well as you do it. So you will see engagement and then play around with it. So you have the 5 C's, which are important to keep in mind. So if you plan that, then the next part is obviously finding the right people for, if you have an in-house content team. If not, it is a larger program. You have to work with the content team, you have to work with the development team, and make sure that the project is planned well so that the content is tightly integrated into this project environment. Sometimes there are also products there that can allow you, for certain applications, there are already products which you can put in place to address this. So depending on your program, and so we do work with customers on a case-to-case basis of how to design that program or an application for them. So those are the 5 C's, I would say. If you keep that in mind and go and plan your program, you can identify the right partner to roll this out for your organization.
Sure, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, thank you so much. I definitely learned a lot, and I hope our viewers did as well.
Thanks, Joseph. Thanks for having me on the chat.